Join the Thinking in English Conversation Club right now and get a 7-day free trial. That's right, 1 week free to see if you enjoy our conversation club. The only way to improve your English speaking ability is by speaking, and speaking as often as possible. And the best way to do this is with my conversation clubs. Join small groups of other Thinking in English listeners, along with me and professional English tutors, to discuss fascinating topics, learn vocabulary, and really improve your English. All of our clubs are conducted online and are an amazing space to practice, test yourself, and meet interesting people. We run clubs 6 times a week, and the more of you who join, the more sessions we will run in the future. You can join the Conversation Club right now for just $10 a month. And if you sign up today, you can get a 7-day free trial. Click the link in the description or go to www.patreon.com/thinkinginenglish to join now. Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. Failure and mistakes are natural parts of language learning. But the majority of people are terrible at learning from failure. Today, I'm going to explain why we are bad at learning from our past mistakes, and then give you a few strategies that might help you to improve. You can find the full transcript for today's episode for free over on the Thinking in English blog. You can click the link in the description. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating for this podcast, and right now there is a 7-day free trial to my Patreon and conversation clubs, so click that link in the description too. Here is today's vocabulary list. Proficiency. Proficiency. A high level of skill or expertise in a particular subject or activity. For example, the job ad said they wanted proficiency in at least 2 languages. To devalue. To devalue. To diminish or reduce the importance, worth, or quality of something. As in, I don't want to devalue his achievement, but he managed to get a promotion without working very hard. Constructively. Constructively. Describes doing something in a positive, helpful, or productive manner. As in, we ought to deal constructively with the problems. Motivation. Motivation. The inner drive or desire to achieve or accomplish something. For example, I don't have the motivation to go running today. To procrastinate. To procrastinate. To delay or postpone doing something, often out of intentional avoidance. For instance, school children who are asked to give advice to younger students about studying tend to procrastinate less. To reflect. To reflect. To think deeply or carefully about something, often in order to gain insight or learn from past experiences. As in, I need time to reflect on what you said. Determined. Determined. Having a strong resolve or firmness of purpose, being committed and persistent. For example, he was determined to become a professional boxer. Embarrassment. Embarrassment. A feeling of self-consciousness, shame, or awkwardness. For example, I felt great embarrassment after forgetting my words during my speech. We are all language learners here. All of you listening are trying to perfect, practice, and maintain your English skills and abilities. And I am a long-term Japanese learner, and one-time learner of Chinese, Spanish, French, and even German. We are all very different people. We come from different countries, different ages, speak different native languages, have different religions or philosophies, and different occupations. Yet, there is one thing that we all share in common. Failure. Failure is a major part of learning a language. It is almost impossible to learn without making mistakes. And while you are studying English, I know you all make mistakes. How do I know this? Because I'm learning a language just like you all. I'm writing this episode while staying in the Japanese countryside. I speak Japanese for hours every single day, and I think I make mistakes every few seconds while speaking. And there have been some big failures in my own language learning journey. Last year, I failed my Japanese proficiency exam. I was hoping to pass level 2, the second highest level, but I just missed out on the necessary score in the vocabulary section of the exam. I failed because I didn't study hard enough. Back in 2018, I entered a Japanese speech contest while I was working as a teacher. The previous year, I had won the upper beginner contest, and I was confident that in 2018 I could enter the upper intermediate contest and win. I wrote a good speech, practiced with the help of my Japanese tutor, and I thought I was prepared. Then, as I stood on the stage in front of everyone, I forgot all of my words. I failed. I applied for a job in Japan last year. It was to work as the international coordinator for a small city. I was rejected, partly because my Japanese wasn't strong enough. And every day I experienced small failures, making mistakes in my language, not understanding the menu properly at a restaurant, or my conversation partner not being able to understand what I'm saying. Failure is part of learning, but this isn't a bad thing. Failure is an opportunity, and we can't succeed without failing first. This idea that failing is a good thing is incredibly popular right now. Online motivational speakers continually tell us that we should celebrate failure. And I have repeatedly talked about how we should all learn from our mistakes. The truth, however, is that this is a really difficult thing to do. I can tell you all, learn from your mistakes, right? I can say that to you, learn from your mistakes. But research suggests you won't. You will make a mistake or experience failure and not learn anything from the experience. In fact, the majority of people struggle to deal with failure constructively. Despite all the people telling us to learn from our mistakes, we don't. There is a famous quote from Samuel Beckett: "Fail again, fail better." This isn't the case. We tend to keep failing in the same way and repeating our mistakes. I'm definitely an example of this. Last summer, I failed my Japanese exam because I didn't study vocabulary enough. Since then, I have done basically zero vocabulary study, even though I intend to take the exam again this year. I haven't learned from my mistakes. I'm repeating them. And I'm sure you all do the same. We fail and fail again. We repeat our mistakes. We don't learn from our failures, even if we think we do. What we all need to do is learn how to learn from failure. This is what I plan to help with in the rest of this episode. First, I'll talk about why we are bad at failing, and then I will try to offer some suggestions on how we can actually learn from our mistakes. So, why are we bad at failing? If we can understand this, perhaps we can recognize some of these same features, these same failings in our own behavior. And once we recognize these behaviors, we can start to change and actually learn. Psychological research suggests there are two common responses to failure displayed by humans. These are known as the sour grape effect and the ostrich effect. Sour grape effect. The phrase sour grapes refers to the situation when someone says something is not good after they couldn't get it. It comes from a story by Aesop called The Fox and the Grapes. In the story, a fox tries many times to reach grapes hanging from a vine, but fails. Feeling frustrated, the fox decides that the grapes are probably sour and not worth having anyway. In a figurative sense, sour grapes describe someone who belittles or criticizes something they wanted but couldn't have, in order to feel better about themselves. It's like a defense mechanism to deal with their disappointment or jealousy. Sour grapes is a way to talk about situations where someone downplays the value or desirability of something they couldn't obtain, as a way to protect their ego or emotions. It shows that they feel bitter or unhappy about not getting what they wanted. So what is the sour grape effect? Well, it refers to the fact that when we fail at a task, we tend to devalue that task in our minds. When I failed my Japanese proficiency test last year, I immediately told everyone who asked that I was only taking it for practice and the result wasn't too important to me. However, if I had succeeded in that task, if I had passed the exam, I would certainly have been really happy and think the result was actually important. This effect was discovered by a Norwegian professor who wanted to understand why people give up on their dreams. He noticed that people often give up on a task or ambition after experiencing failure, even if they could succeed with just a little more effort or practice. In his experiments, he discovered that people who fail at a task and receive negative feedback underestimate the importance of their future performance on their happiness. Let me try to explain with an example. The professor discovered that reminding a student with a low grade average that they were currently below average made them devalue the benefits of graduating with a high grade. So in other words, if you tell someone that they have a low grade, they care less, they're less motivated to get a high grade. And we see this all the time. People who don't do particularly well at university or school tend to be the people who devalue the benefits of university or school the most. And when I worked as a teacher, students who received a low English grade would be the first to say they no longer cared about English, even if before that grade they really liked the subject. This can have a serious impact on our motivation. One example is if you fail in a job interview for the job of your dreams, but then decide to never work in that industry again. And I did this. Back in 2015, I failed in the application process to become a diplomat in the UK, which was my dream job since I was 16 or 17, and I decided to never apply again. Rather than learning from my mistakes and trying again, we often give up or convince ourselves that we never really wanted to do that thing in the first place. The ostrich effect. The ostrich effect references the popular myth that ostriches, the giant African birds, stick their heads in the sand when they are scared or upset. Now, they don't do this, but it's a popular myth. And there is also the idiom, bury your head in the sand, which means to ignore a problem or an unpleasant situation and hope that it would all disappear. So, in the context of failure, the ostrich effect means ignoring your failure and concentrating on something new, unrelated, or different. Doing this means you don't have to process the news of your failure or mistakes. For example, it has been noted that people with investments check the status of their investments more often when they are growing and less often when they are falling, because people don't like bad news. They just ignore the bad news. I do the same with podcast statistics. If the number of listeners are higher than usual, I'll be checking every few minutes. If they are lower than usual, I'll not check at all, because I don't like the idea of failing. The ostrich effect suggests that we tend to overlook bad news, failure, and mistakes. And this means we do not learn from our own failures and mistakes. There was a famous experiment about this called the facing failure game. This experiment tested people's ability to guess the meaning of symbols. They were then told if they were right or wrong and given feedback on their mistakes. After this, they were given another go to remember their own answers. And something was discovered. Most people did not learn from their mistakes. Even though they were told what they got wrong, they didn't learn. They repeated the same errors as they did the first time. In an extension of this experiment, they then repeated the experiment but showed people someone else's results and told them what was right or wrong in someone else's results. What happened? Well, they remembered much better and got a much higher score the next time. It suggests that when people are told they did something wrong, they struggled to process the information and improve. But if they are told someone else's mistakes and told how to improve someone else's answer, then they learned. The embarrassment and hurt feelings of being wrong stopped people's ability to learn. And I've noticed this a lot as a language teacher. If you offer a correction or tell someone they are doing something wrong, they tend to not improve or make changes. Okay, it turns out that we are not all good at learning from failure. Even though we know that feedback should be important to us, and that making mistakes is an essential part of learning, especially for English learners, we struggle to deal constructively with failure. We will either change our expectations or lose motivation, or just completely ignore our mistakes, and therefore not learn anything. How can we change this? How can we begin to actually learn from failure? One strategy is known as self-distancing. We saw in the ostrich effect that we tend to hide from bad news, failures and mistakes if they're about our own errors. And this is because it's embarrassing to fail, and negative feedback hurts our feelings. When we think about ourselves failing, we struggle to deal with that failure. So, a good solution is to try and distance yourself from failure. For example, instead of thinking, why did I fail this test? You could try asking, why did Tom fail that test? Right? Why did this other person fail that test? The psychologist Ethan Kross has discovered that this kind of self-distancing can reduce our negative reactions to failure. It becomes easier to be objective and think about the reasons for the mistakes made. We can analyze why we failed without becoming disappointed or annoyed by it. Alternatively, one of my other favorite approaches is offering advice. I found out early on in my studying and learning journey that offering advice or helping other people with their work or study is an amazing way to realize your own mistakes and improve. While failures hurt our feelings, helping others makes us feel great. In this way, we can balance our emotions and avoid sour grapes or acting like an ostrich. You are forced to deal with failure when giving advice, but we don't have to be embarrassed. I use this approach all the time. In fact, this podcast is basically a version of this. I give you guys advice about motivation, procrastination, study tips, and more. And while I'm doing this, I'm learning from my own past mistakes and making better habits. Studies have shown that people trying to lose weight feel much more motivated when they write out tips and advice to other people trying to lose weight. And that school children who are asked to give advice to younger students about studying tend to procrastinate less and complete more homework. So if you're struggling to deal with mistakes and failure, try to distance yourself from your errors and try offering advice to someone else. It can really benefit you and help you to improve and make changes in your studying. So here is today's final thought. As English learners, there are some key takeaways we can draw from the experiences I shared in this episode. Embrace failure as part of the learning process. Making mistakes is an inevitable part of learning a language, including English. Instead of fearing failure, view it as an opportunity for growth and improvement. And remember that even experienced language learners make mistakes. Learn from your mistakes. Although it may be challenging, strive to learn from your mistakes rather than repeating them. Reflect on what went wrong, identify areas for improvement, and take proactive steps to address them. Avoid the sour grape effect. When faced with failure, it's common to downplay the significance of the task or devalue its importance. Resist the temptation to dismiss the importance of what you were trying to achieve just because you didn't succeed. Recognize the value in your goals and remain determined to achieve them. Overcome the ostrich effect. Don't bury your head in the sand when faced with failure or mistakes. Instead of ignoring them, confront them head on. Acknowledge your failures, analyze the reasons behind them, and seek ways to improve. Remember that facing your mistakes is essential for growth. Practice self-distancing. When reflecting on your failures, try to distance yourself emotionally from the situation. Instead of dwelling on your own mistakes, imagine them happening to someone else and analyze the reasons objectively. This approach can help you gain a clearer perspective and find effective solutions. Offer advice and help others. Sharing your knowledge and helping fellow English learners can be a powerful tool for self-improvement. By offering advice and guidance, you reinforce your own understanding and identify areas where you can improve. Teaching others also boosts your motivation and confidence. By applying these lessons and strategies to your own English learning journey, you can overcome challenges, learn from your mistakes, and make significant progress in your language skills. But what do you think? Are you able to learn from your failures and mistakes? Or do you ignore them? Or do you have or experience the sour grape effect? Let me know by leaving a comment on this episode. You can leave a comment on Spotify. You can leave a comment on the Thinking in English transcript. Click the link in the description. Or you can send me a message on Instagram. Or if you're listening on YouTube, comment on YouTube as well. Make sure you're following YouTube. You're subscribed to me on YouTube. You're following Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter as well. Make sure you're following all these social medias. If you're interested, there's currently a 7-day free trial to my conversation clubs and bonus episodes and Patreon subscription platform. You get 7 days for free. Click the link in the description and you can come and join us in a conversation club and meet me and hopefully consider supporting the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.